Hello, and you are back in the Velvet Room with Jokerthefool. This is our 83rd episode, and today we'll be discussing the criminal enterprise of New York State and vaccine payouts. So, I'm New York, born and raised, been here my whole life, so I know just how much of a tyrannical nanny state it can be. I got some proof of that I'm going to talk about right now, actually. I buy a lot of supplements, and one of the companies I get supplements from, Ambrosia Collective, is one of the make great high quality stuff, and two of the free supplements that I buy for that help regulate weight and appetite. I can't buy from their site because New York has passed this asinine law that bans any supplement that's marketed as fat loss and muscle building. So you have to be verified over the age of 18. So I can still get it from Amazon. I'm sure you can get it from the vitamin shop. These big centralized corporations, and this is all part of the intention that they want to regulate all the small businesses out of existence. This is why the corporatist consumer system exists the way that it is. But of course, it's one of the easy things for them to pass. They get to say, "Hey, we reduced the distribution of these supplements by X percentage points, so kids aren't getting them. We're protecting the children." Meanwhile, like, what, 75% of these kids in high school are smoking jewels and smoking all doing all sorts of drugs. I mean, it's a bad state of affairs if you can't get drugs in schools and prisons, right? If in terms of the drug distribution market, right? Those are the most common places you can get drugs, and that is still the case. All these kids are vaping. You can get McDonald's, you can get the crappy food from the grocery store. The FDA is trying to get Ozempic approved for kids, and that's going to be a-okay with New York State, I'm sure. But God forbid they buy something from the GNC that's marketed as a fat burner, right? But this is just the nanny state, just the state imposing its will because they have this fetish for imposing power. Now, me not being able to get supplements from the site that I want, right? I can still get these. I can get them from Amazon, Vitamin Shop. I don't like that. I like buying direct from the manufacturer, like DTC. That's the way. That's the future. I like that, but hey, they can't afford to do the ID verification system. Like that, they can't afford the state fining them doing this RICO stuff or whatever they would try to do. So it's like, hey, we can't ship to you, right? And that's all well and good. But there's something much worse that New York State has been doing or did. And Ripa talked about this. Young Ripa 59 talked about this. But I'm going to talk about this too. This article comes from Red State. Headline reads, Judge sentences New York City man to 10 years for gunsmithing after saying Second Amendment non-existent in courtroom. Now, this is Dexter Taylor, Brooklyn-based software engineer, built a lot of stuff in his garage, had a SWAT raid in 2022. He was buying these parts legally, putting together guns. Again, this is a victimless crime. No one was killed in him acquiring these parts and then putting them together into guns. This is just something that the state didn't like, so they're throwing the book at him so that way they can basically fearmonger people into not exercising their Second Amendment rights. And New York State is one of the absolute worst places in terms of being able to own a gun. It takes like over a year to get any sort of concealed carry permit. They have all these regulations and all this stuff in place. There's no reason why I am not you want to try and get any sort of guns while living in New York. That's why I want to get to New Hampshire and then to get my armory there, because the state of New York can't prosecute me there. So it's all give and take. But the way this judge, Abina Darka, who presided over Taylor's trial, has been absolutely disastrous if this is actually the case, saying the Second Amendment doesn't exist in the trial, and basically just being one of the prosecutors. Essentially, it's basically a kangaroo court. They wanted to put this man in jail. They wanted to throw the book at him because they hate guns. They hate the concept of people owning guns. They want to push the thumb on people, and this comes from the people who think that all you need to do to get rid of gun violence is to pass the Ban All the Guns Act. Joe Biden signs that, and then gun violence magically disappears overnight. And it's the evil Republicans that are preventing us from living and entering that great utopia, right? And that is the mindset that someone like Abina Darga has, and that's why saying the Second Amendment doesn't exist. Well, it does exist, right? It is the law of the land, and New York has to follow the Second Amendment. Right? They can't supersede that. That is explicitly not doing your due diligence as a judge. This is definitely grounds for a mistrial, but I doubt that's going to happen with how corrupt the legal system is, especially this is happening in New York City. So all the DAs, all of the judges, all the people who push the paperwork agree with the decision that was made, and they're going to do everything they can to make sure Dexter Taylor rots in prison for hurting nobody. Just put pieces of metal together and made weapons that he didn't use to kill anybody. Right? It was just something that he did because he felt like doing it, and it's not a it's not a victimizing crime to inherently build the firearms. Right? Now, if you use them to aggress upon people, that's another thing. But that's not what it's happened. It's that he bought these parts and put them together, and they're prosecuting him for doing that, which again is not something the state has the right to do. It's definitely not in the purview of the Second Amendment. But hey, they don't believe in the Second Amendment because meaningfully the people who enforce the laws, who are supposed to protect and defend the Constitution, they took it and they wiped their asses with it years ago. Constitution doesn't mean anything for a lot of legal interactions, and this is just absolute proof of that. So this is something that you want to keep in mind, that yes, we have the 10 amendments, we have the Constitution, and those are good things. They've done a lot in terms of being roadblocks for the state, but when there's a will, there's a way, especially in states like New York. You'll see stuff like this in California as well, where they'll just egregiously violate people's rights are in the Constitution, and more less important than them being in the Constitution. These are just rights of self-ownership. Like Dexter Taylor had every right to do what he did, and the state had no right to aggress upon him for exercising his property rights. Right? He owns himself, therefore he owns his labor, and he used his labor to get these things. He got currency, value from his labor, bought these parts, put them together, property that he owns, did not hurt anybody, and then it's like, well, you did something that we don't like, so we want to throw the book at you. And right, this is just to discourage gun ownership. This is make gun culture seem bad and evil. That's what they want to do. They just hate guns. But again, this guy being in Rikers, this guy rotting in prison for 10 years isn't going to do anything for the crime rates in New York City. All the gang shootings, the fact that you'll have people pulling up the street just killing people in broad daylight as some sort of gang initiation, none of that's going to end, right? There's recently footage going around of a guy dragging a woman behind a car and then sexually assaulting her, right? That's not going to get prevented by this, but they get to pat themselves on the back, feel good, and say, hey, we prevented gun violence. We got ghost guns out of distribution. We're such good people, right? And this is really what it is, right? You can't bring the Second Amendment up in this courtroom. It doesn't exist here, right? And she's meaningfully right? It doesn't. So even the fact that it's something that exists, it is something that exists in the American legal system. If the judge that's presiding over your case doesn't want to take it into account and then throws the book at you, and then you go through the appeals process and all gets shot down by all the people working around her that are determined to keep this man in prison, then the Second Amendment meaningfully doesn't exist. And this is one of the reasons why I'm against the state as much as I am, because you have the right of self-ownership. You own yourself, and all other rights stem from that, and this state's existence inherently aggresses upon that, is inherently transgressing upon that. And when you're representing this video, you don't hate the state as much as you can. If you despise the state, you don't despise the state as much as you possibly can. It's reasons like this, because the state's existence inherently means that they will aggress upon your right to self-ownership. And this case is absolute proof of it, and it's all the more reason for me to get out while the getting is good. But with that, we're going to move on to the next topic. You're sticking with me. I love you for that. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, or just keep listening. Always love people who listen to this podcast. You are the true jokers. But we've got this other article headline reads, over 13 million paid out in vaccine injury claims in Australia. So this is from Zero Hedge. So this was 20.5 million Australian dollars, 13.2 million USD. It kind of confused me. It was 13 million, then it says 20 million, but it's 20 and a half Australian bucks, and then 13.2 USD. So you have service expects to receive new claims until the COVID-19 vaccine claim scheme's end date of the September 30th, 2024. So I think I have Australian listeners. So if you did get the clot shot and you had anything, put in a claim, even if it's the smallest thing. Right, even if you got like a swollen lymph node for a week or two, put in a claim. Get some money from them poisoning you. Right, I got poisoned by these freaking people. I got the 2 Pfizer vaccines. I somehow survived that. Right, I could not get me down. I didn't get any of the boosters though. I wasn't. I was awake by the time they were rolling those out. So I just could not do it. But I got the first 2. I think mRNA technology is interesting, but it's definitely underbaked, and this was just pushed onto the people for a variety of reasons. But anyway, of course, the vaccines, they were rushed. They had all these safety signals that were ignored, so they vaccinated way too many people. I mean, it's not vaccinating anybody at all, arguably, but the young, healthy population, there really wasn't much of a justification to do it. If you look at the numbers and the data, doesn't really justify the vaccine rollout. But you can, let's see, Australia's, but anyway, since you had so many people who were vaccinated, right? There is people who got vaccine injured, and it's become such of a problem that they are finally starting to compensate people for what they did to them, to try and, I guess, ease the valve, to try and prevent like an outright rebellion of people because of what they try to do. So over $20 million, $16.9 million dollars worth of claims up to the end of November 2023. Let's see, so Australia's COVID-19 vaccine claim scheme allows individuals to claim losses above $1,000 in relation to moderate to severe adverse reactions to COVID-19 vaccines. So these vaccines approved by the Therapeutic Goods Administration, AstraZeneca, which we talked about. There's a man who had a brain hemorrhage, thrombosis. That lawsuit is where AstraZeneca had to admit in court that their vaccine, which isn't an mRNA vaccine, it's a viral vector vaccine where they take, I think it was adenovirus, but basically a virus that's not super infectious to humans, and instead of having it replicate and make copies of itself, it makes copies of the spike protein. So the spike protein in itself is bad for human health. And then you have the whole mRNA thing as well, has all of its side effects, but that's a whole other thing. But the AstraZeneca vaccine, slightly different than Pfizer and Moderna, and the Novavax jab. I can't remember if that's I cannot remember if that was, I don't think that's a viral vector. I think that might have been where they actually take the vaccine, take the virus and, basically either kill it or weaken it. But I don't quote me on that. But anyway, the vaccines from AstraZeneca, Pfizer, Moderna, and Novavax are included in these claims. So if you got any of if you're Australian, you got any of these, unfortunately, and you have some sort of health effect, right, $1,000 moderate to severe, then put in a claim, get your money. That's what I would say. They force you to be poisoned with how ridiculous Australia's lockdowns were, rounding people up, having them in camps, the digital passports, all of this nonsense, right? So if you can make them prove like as much of a paper trail that we can force into existence of the fact that the good amount of the population was severely harmed by what they forced on the people, right? There are people who had to get jabbed to keep their jobs, who had to function in society, go to gyms, go to restaurants, be able to use public transportation. They wanted every single place where you could possibly encounter people had to have some sort of vaccine requirement. They wanted that. They pushed for that. Australia was like bleeding example of the COVID authoritarianism. So I am glad that this compensation program is happening. I'm glad that there was $20 million of claims that happened. I don't think it's nearly enough, and I don't think it's going to be not retribution, but it's not going to make up for what they did, for just how tyrannical the state of Australia was because of the COVID-19 because of the pandemic, and not just before the vaccine, but definitely after the vaccine, and forcing that on the people. It was absolutely ridiculous what they did, and I'm glad that they have to at least, give something to the people. So it was, they've received 4,191 claims and paid 286 claims to the value of $20.5 million. So if all those claims go through, it's probably going to be, it could be somewhere like, $1 to $500 million. And hopefully that happens, but I imagine there's going to be a lot of people get denied. It's going to be a lot of people who are trying to game the system, which I say they gamed you. So if you're trying to game them, I am all okay with that. But I think with that, we're going to leave it here. I don't have much to say other than the fact that what COVID-19 allowed the states to do was absolutely criminal, even more so than what states do during these non-emergency times. So that's really what I want to keep in mind. The state's existence is inherently an aggression upon your right to self-ownership, and the COVID-19 pandemic really allowed them to turn up that aggression upon your rights like up to 11. And that's really what I want you to remember, and that's the legacy they want to leave. That's the precedent they want to establish, that they own you instead of you owning yourself. Do not let them. But with that, I am out. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. Thank you for being in the Velvet Room with Joker the Fool. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, whether you're listening on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, or Substack. And be sure to subscribe to my Substack, velvetroompublishing.substack.com, to keep up with Machine to Man and all my other projects.